We're live this morning as civil rights leaders urge President-elect Donald Trump to denounce racism and acts of hate and bigotry. The Southern Poverty Law Center is hosting this briefing. It's set to start in just a couple of moments, live here from the National Press Club. Again, we're live from the National Press Club here in Washington, D.C., as this morning a group of civil rights leaders are holding a briefing to urge President-elect Donald Trump to denounce racism and acts of hate and bigotry. This event hosted by the Southern Poverty Law Center. We're just a couple of minutes away from the start. Coming up on the C-SPAN Networks live here on C-SPAN 3 at 6 Eastern, Democratic Senators Chris Coons and Amy Klobuchar, along with Republican James Lankford, will discuss how they and Congress plan to work with the Trump administration. Also on C-SPAN Live at 10:10 this morning, we'll show you a portion of a forum on the global economy and trade policy with Tom Friedman, New York Times foreign affairs correspondent. Another section, discussion will get underway at 11 Eastern. Also, the House and Senate both in session today. The House will be working on a number of small bills, including veterans' health. You can see the House live when they gavel in at noon Eastern and 2 p.m. for legislative business on our companion network, C-SPAN. The Senate will continue work on a rural health bill, and C-SPAN 2 will have that at 10 Eastern.
Good morning. My name is Richard Cohen. I'm the president of the Southern Poverty Law Center. I'm joined today by Brenda Abdulal, the charity's program director from Muslim Advocates, Janet Murguia, the president of the National Council of Raza, Randy Weingarten, the president of the American Federation of Teachers, Wade Henderson, the president of the Leadership Conference for Civil and Human Rights. I'd also like to acknowledge the presence of two people who are important to us, Gloria Plan from Moms Rising and Lakshmi Shridan from SALT. Thank you both for joining us. We're here today to release two reports that document that President-elect Donald Trump's own words have sparked incidents around the country and have had hate incidents around the country and have had a profoundly negative effect on our schools. The first report is called 10 Days After, Harassment and Intimidation in the Aftermath of the Election. It describes 867 incidents of hate that we collected from around the country in the 10 days immediately following the election. I have no doubt whatsoever that this is a tremendous, tremendous undercount. Now, the incidents we're talking about have taken place in schools, on public streets and parks, and in retail establishments. Many people have been targeted in their homes. The incidents have been ugly. They have been aimed at people because of their ethnicity, their race, their religion, their sexual orientation, and their gender. Time after time, the perpetrators have invoked Mr. Trump's name, his slogan, or his words in their assaults. Time after time, those who reported hate incidents to us said that they had never experienced anything like that before. The level of hate that's been unleashed by the election, they've told us, is something entirely new. Our second report is called After Election Day, the Trump Effect. It is based on the first 10,000 reports that we've received from educators from around the country about the impact of the election on their students and their schools. That impact has been incredibly disturbing. 80% of the educators, the teachers who have responded to us, have reported heightened anxiety among their traditionally marginalized students. Students who are recent immigrants are living in real fear. 40% of the respondents, 40% of the teachers who responded to us, reported hearing derogatory comments directed against students of color, Muslims, immigrants, and LGBT students. Over 2,500 specific incidents were reported to us where the teachers told us that Mr. Trump's name had been invoked, where rhetoric from the election had been employed. Again, and most disturbingly perhaps, 85% of the teachers who responded to us told us that they were worried about the long run. They were worried about the continuing impact of the election, Mr. Trump's rhetoric on their students. They don't think that this is going away anytime soon. Now, since his election, Mr. Trump has disavowed white supremacy. He's told the harassers to stop it. But what he hasn't done is acknowledge that his own words have sparked the barrage of hate that we're seeing. Instead, what's he done? He's feigned ignorance. He said that he's surprised that any of his supporters would be harassing or intimidating anyone. He says he has no idea why white supremacists would be energized by his election. Really? Neither of these facts should be a mystery to anyone, much less to Mr. Trump. He's been singing the white supremacist song since he came down that escalator in his tower and announced his candidacy, calling Mexican immigrants racist. Instead of pretending to be surprised by the pervasive hate that has infected our country, Mr. Trump needs to take responsibility for it and repair the damage that he's caused. He needs to speak out forcefully and repeatedly against bigotry. He needs to apologize to the communities he's injured and demonstrate that they will be protected and valued in his administration. He needs to go to Jersey City and apologize to the Muslim community there for casting aspersions on their patriotism by lying about their reaction to the 9/11 attacks. He needs to go to Los Angeles to assure dreamers there that he will not use any information from their applications for deferred action to deport them or their families. And he needs to go to Chicago to apologize to the black community for his grotesque stereotypic descriptions of their lives and neighborhoods. More importantly, his words must be followed by concrete actions, both in his policies and in his appointments, that repair the wounds of division that his campaign has caused. 600,000 people have signed a petition on our websites asking him to do just that. If he does not, anything less than an apology, repairing the damages that he's caused, reaching out to marginalized communities, and having his actions follow his words, if he doesn't do those things, the hate that Mr. Trump has unleashed during this election season will continue to flourish. Now, I'll be happy to answer a few questions in a few minutes, but first I'd like to turn the podium over to my colleagues. Brenda?
Thank you, Richard. Good morning. Today, we stand hand in hand with our fellow Americans who reject racism, bigotry, anti-Muslim hate, anti-Semitism, and division. The FBI reported a 67% increase in hate crimes against Muslims in 2015. And we expect an even more dramatic rise in incidents of hate and violence when the data for 2016 is tabulated and released. In fact, Muslim Advocates has been tracking hate crimes since November 2015, and we have recorded nearly 175 hate crimes against American Muslims or those perceived to be Muslim in the date leading up to the election. And we're disturbed by the increased frequency of reported hate crimes and hate incidents since the election all across the country. President-elect Trump's recent statements against hate violence and white supremacist groups that supported his election is a step in the right direction, but there must be more. We need him to strongly reject bigotry in all its forms, unequivocally call on Americans to stop the hate violence, and ensure that his administration will prosecute perpetrators of hate crimes to the fullest extent under the law. Furthermore, President-elect Trump must reconsider some of the selections he has made as top advisors to his administration. Otherwise, the selections of individuals like Steve Bannon, Lieutenant General Michael Flynn, and Senator Jeff Sessions indicate that the bigoted and divisive rhetoric that we saw in the campaign will continue as a matter of policy and practice in the White House. America is hurting right now, and all of us need to come together and feel safe. Children are getting bullied. Women with headscarves are being attacked, and bigoted rhetoric has become commonplace across the country. Hate crimes have skyrocketed, and American Muslims, like many Americans, are genuinely fearful. If President-elect Trump wants to bring America together and be a leader for all Americans, he will need to disavow the dangerous proposals and ideas that single out and demonize Muslims and other communities. Now is the time for President-elect Trump to make changes in his rhetoric, his selections, and the policies under consideration by his incoming administration in order to send a strong message of unity to all Americans. Thank you.
My name is Janet Murguia, and I'm President and CEO of the National Council of La Raza. You know, less than 48 hours after election night, NCLR, National Council of La Raza, hosted a check-in call with all of our affiliates across the country. Our affiliates are community-based organizations that provide health, education, economic, and social services to millions of Latinos and others every single day. Many of them run charter schools or after-school programs. More than 100 organizations, nearly 150, participated, and what we heard from them troubled us deeply. Virtually all of these affiliates focused on the same issue. We asked them, what were they hearing and seeing in our community, even in those 2 days after the election? And what they said was the devastating impact of the election, its tone, its divisiveness, its harsh rhetoric, and yes, its outcome was having on the children they know and serve. They reported on countless incidents of harassment, of verbal and physical taunts, of widespread bullying, and most tragically, of many students contemplating taking their own lives. They also stressed the profound anxiety and fear that have gripped these children about the future. They are deeply worried. These children are deeply worried about their parents and other family members due to the immigration status. These kids are frightened, and with reason, that their families may be broken up by the policies of the incoming administration. They are left to wonder whether the draconian statements of candidate Trump will be carried out by President Trump. In short, everything SPLC chronicled in its new critically important report is corroborated by the calls and conversations we've had over the past several weeks. We are angered and saddened, but not surprised by the fact that 90% of teachers have witnessed a negative impact on their students and that 80% noted how anxious their students are. This is unacceptable. NCLR has already begun working with our affiliates to provide support, including mental health services and teacher training to address bullying. We are working with partners like our friends here today to combat this issue together and at a national level. And we are grateful to SPLC both for documenting what is going on by issuing these reports and also for helping us document what is going on in our community. For example, we've already translated and made in a culturally competent way SPLC's report form from English to Spanish and posted it on our website. But much more needs to happen, and it has to start with the president-elect. While he has said he wants to be the president of all Americans, we've heard precious little in response to what is going on in his name, especially when it comes to the impact it has had on children and young people. President-elect Trump needs to reassure, or at the very least address, the anxiety and fear of so many communities for whom he will now also be president. President-elect Trump, we are asking you, we need you to protect and defend all Americans and condemn the violence and hate being committed in your name. Reach out to marginalized communities. Repair the damage. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. Thank you, Brenda and Janet and Wade. My name is Randy Weingarten. I'm the president of the 1.6 million member American Federation of Teachers. We are the largest college union and the second largest teachers union. I'm here today not just to thank Richard, the SPLC, the other speakers, who all in big and small ways have been spending their adult lives fighting hate and bigotry, while at the same time increasing opportunity, economic and educational opportunity for Americans. This is not an either-or situation. This is a both-and situation in these United States of America. I appreciate what SPLC has now done because we cannot live in an evidence-free zone. During the campaign, Donald Trump's rhetoric and policy proposals pitted Americans against each other and created a culture of fear and division. And unfortunately, as the other speakers have said, and as this report demonstrates, we've seen a disturbing and unacceptable surge in hateful actions all too often carried out in Mr. Trump's name, particularly in schools. And while, as the other speakers have said, while Mr. Trump looked at the camera directly in a 60 Minutes interview and said to the people who were doing it, when asked a question, to stop it, his appointments are sending a very different message. As teachers know, you need to actually be consistent in your message if you want people to hear it. So the nomination of Jeff Sessions, the appointment of Steve Bannon, and the appointment of Mike Flynn all have sent the message that white supremacy and anti-Muslim conspiracy theories are in vogue these days. Why am I here? Because there is a tremendous amount at stake, particularly in our schools, pre-K through university, public and private, all of which must be safe and welcoming places of learning and acceptance for our students, for our parents, for our communities, and for the educators who serve our kids, for our children to survive, for them to grow, for them to thrive. They have to feel safe at school, and they have to feel that their parents are safe. And since this campaign, and now since this election, more and more do not feel safe. Over the past year, teachers have reported this disturbing trend. We even called it the Trump effect. We have story after story. A community college faculty member in Washington State was brought to tears when verbally assaulted with anti-immigrant slurs by other students. One of our members who came and testified last week, Scott Caston, who teaches at Maple Grove Senior High School near the Twin Cities in Minnesota, had black students find a sign saying, "Whites only, white America," and a vulgar message with an N-word painted on a stall door. I can go on and on. In my hometown, New York City, last week, 5 swastikas in Chelsea. My whole life, there was not more than 1 swastika anywhere in that city. 11 days ago, we sent a letter signed by 200 organizations, co-signed by Southern Poverty Law Center and by AFT, to the president-elect, asking him to denounce these actions that were done in his name. Over 43,000 people signed that letter as well. We know he received it. Since then, crickets, silence. Mr. Trump has claimed he will keep Americans safe and he will stand up for the little guy. But he refuses to speak up for the littlest guys, our children, who are being taunted and bullied in schools by kids who use his name as a weapon. The president-elect knows how to use his voice. He's done so to denounce a Broadway show, to denounce media personalities. But his lack of leadership here to end the hate-fueled acts inspired by his divisive campaign rhetoric is deafening. And don't tell me that others haven't stood up. Look what just happened, not just here, but just this weekend, even with Delta, where we saw that one unruly Trump-thumping passenger made more than 100 travelers uncomfortable. What did Delta do? They not only denounced the bad behavior, they barred the man from ever traveling on a Delta airplane. They apologized and reimbursed the victimized passengers. We've seen that kind of leadership from Governor Cuomo in New York, from Mayor de Blasio in New York City, from Governor Wolf in Pennsylvania, from Mayor Garcetti in LA. It's time for our president-elect to use his voice to effectively and unequivocally denounce these hateful acts that are done in his name. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. First, I want to thank Richard Cohen and the Southern Poverty Law Center for these important reports and for their important research and leadership. I also want to thank my colleagues who are here this morning to bear witness so powerfully to the challenge of our time in addressing issues of hate and violence triggered in large part by the presidential election we've just experienced. Now, my name is Wade Henderson. I serve as president and CEO of the Leadership Conference on Civil and Human Rights. The Leadership Conference is the nation's leading civil and human rights coalition with over 200 national organizations working to build an America as good as its ideals. I'm honored to note that all of the organizations here today are members of our coalition. Now, throughout the presidential campaign, as you've heard, and especially in its aftermath, many of the communities that we represent have come to live in fear for their basic safety and well-being. And as these reports have made abundantly clear, that fear is unfortunately well justified. And during the course of this campaign, as we've heard, President-elect Trump discussed a broad range of proposals that, if implemented, would dramatically reverse our nation's progress on civil and human rights. And in the process, he has vilified innocent Americans as rapists, as terrorists, as criminals, inciting neighbors and co-workers and classmates to turn against one another. Now, the hate-filled rhetoric of this campaign was shameful and divisive in ways that go well beyond the boundaries of our political norms and traditions. But the vast majority of Americans who voted for Donald J. Trump did not vote for hatred, nor did they vote for violence, nor did they vote for terrorizing people for being who they are. Now, the America we know, the America we celebrate, the America we strive to create, is a nation that honors and respects equal protection of the law for all of its people. It embraces its diversity as a strength, and it strives to be a place where all people can live and work and study and pray and love as free and equal Americans. Now, the same nation that values these ideals, and let's just be honest about it, is itself an imperfect work in progress, but a work in progress nonetheless. Yes, its public schools are notoriously unequal. Its young men and women of color are often profiled by police, as are some in the Muslim community or communities thought to be Muslim, like Sikhs, for example, who experience harassment. It warehouses people of color in prisons, often with irrational and racially disparate sentences. But we know, as a nation and as communities, we can do better. But we won't do better with a president who fans the flames of bigotry, or treats women with disdain, or who responds to this outpouring of hatred and violence with indifference. Now, governors, state attorneys general, U.S. attorneys, members of Congress have already responded with programs, initiatives, and legislation which we celebrate for enhanced data collection and enforcement, and public calls for this kind of violence to end. But President-elect Trump has thus far failed to do his part. Now, President-elect Trump, you vowed to be the president for all of us. Today, we are calling on you to make good on that pledge by disavowing the hate speech that has infected our public discourse, and by telling your supporters and all Americans to stop committing these acts. You must lead by example in both word and deed. The nation and the world are watching. I will close with this one observation. Several of my colleagues have noted the appointments that President-elect Trump has made in the early days of his transition. And indeed, those appointments send a message that is unmistakable. And that unmistakable message seems to reinforce the very issues that are at the core of our concerns today. We are concerned about the impact of Jeff Sessions at the Department of Justice, General Mike Flynn, or Steve Bannon just a heartbeat away from the presidency. But the time to discuss these issues will soon arise on Capitol Hill. Right now, we're asking the president to stand up and to be counted and honor the pledge that he has made to the American people to be the president of us all. Thank you.
Thank you, Wade. Thank you, Janet. Thank you, Brenda. Thank you, Randy. We'll take questions now. Yes, ma'am. I think we have a microphone if people can't hear.
I'm loud, though.
It's a school teacher voice.
My sister's a teacher. Do you see this administration and this president as someone you can work with over the next 4 years, or do you see yourselves basically as being kind of this, party in opposition for the duration of his presidency?
Well, I'll let Wade answer that, but I guess from our point of view, it's both, right? Mr. Trump is the president. Where there's common ground, we're certainly not going to oppose him on issues just for the sake of doing so. What we're concerned about, though, of course, is that there's very precious little common ground, and that the people he's appointed to lead important agencies, such as the Department of Justice, or the people he's indicated that he will nominate, are going to roll back policies, initiatives that are critical, issues in voting, issues in policing, issues related to the criminalization of poverty. I think in all of those kinds of issues, I think the civil rights community will stand united against those policies. Wait, I don't know.
No, I think no more need be said by me, but my colleagues.
Let me just say something.
Please.
You know, it's an important question, and I think, you know, we're up here, we're trying to do our job. Our job is to represent these constituencies. Our job is to promote the civil rights and interests of these constituencies. And so when we feel that that's being threatened, we need to call it out. But I want to make it really clear, we're also reaching out. We're asking President-elect Trump to hear us and to respond and to meet with marginalized communities and our leadership and give us a chance to either raise these concerns, provide more education and background, or to hear him out. It's not fair for many of our communities to be kept in the dark, to not know that, to have that uncertainty, and to be a young child with an American citizen child and perhaps have an undocumented parent, or to be a dreamer and not know about your future. It's our job to do that and to call that out to the president-elect. But so we want to do both. We want to make sure we're calling out rhetoric and actions that we feel are threatening to our communities, but we're also extending a hand out to say, we're willing to work with you. You promised, you pledged to be a president for all of us. We want to help you do that.
So at the end of the day, if we can do things in a bipartisan way, we want to do that. Like Janet and Wade said, our job is to create, my union's job and my job is to create economic and educational opportunity in America, to ensure that we lift all boats, to ensure that there's no hate and bigotry, and to promote pluralism. So we have actually asked Mr. Trump through a direct letter on November 18th to do this. He has not responded. A president of the United States, we need to find ways to have that president bring people together. And just like when there is common ground, like there was in the last Congress on the education, on the ESSA bill, the new federal ed bill, we all came together and we all said it was a good bill. But at the end of the day, this is first things first. A president-elect has to create a climate that keeps Americans safe, all Americans, those who voted for him and those who didn't vote for him. And so this is a really important test for the president-elect of whether he will keep all Americans safe.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, Maria Cornell with Opinion. I have several questions. Sorry. Thank you for doing this. I have several questions, but I'll stick to just one here. You know, judging from his tweets, he said, for instance, that he wants to take away citizenship from burn flags, and that's a protected speech. But are you hopeful that since he's been walking away from some of his campaign pledges, that he may reconsider some of the cabinet positions that he's named? Or, I mean, how hopeful, do you see hopeful signs that he will walk away from some of the rhetoric or hear you out and maybe make some adjustments? Thank you.
Thank you. I'm Wade Henderson again with the Leadership Conference, and thank you for your question, which is really a follow-up to the first question about whether, in fact, we were hopeful we could work together. I was reluctant to speak initially because I wanted my colleagues who head organizations whose communities are being directly affected by these issues to speak first. But I thought it was important as well to be clear about where we as a community, in addition to the remarks of my colleagues, also stand. You know, when Maya Angelou once observed that when someone shows you who they are, believe them, is a standard that has to be applied both to the person currently occupying the White House and any who would hope to replace him. We are deeply troubled that in the wake of what we have described as incidents of hate-related speech, activity, and in some instances violence, this president-elect has chosen to address the issue only in the most superficial manner. What we are asking him to do is to provide the kind of thoughtful leadership that he made a pledge to all Americans to provide. And assuming he does that, then we will take his actions for what they represent, a step forward in helping to bring us together. But I don't want to overstate the challenge that we face, because the appointment of Steve Bannon as a counselor and advisor a few steps away from the White House, when he has supported and embraced organizations that take direct views that are anti-Semitic, Islamophobic, anti-immigrant, and racist, or appoints as an attorney general someone whose record would suggest he will have great difficulty in enforcing civil rights laws, including hate crimes laws, on the books. That is a real challenge. And so we are looking to have the Congress of the United States, the Senate, do its job where it can to offer advice and consent in the case of Senator Sessions, and in other instances to implore the president-elect to use his discretion wisely. Reconsider the appointment of Steve Bannon. Reconsider the appointment of Mike Flynn, and reflect the interests that we all are trying to promote. Thank you.
Just want to comment.
Of course,
on this.
please.
And maybe I'm going to try to articulate this as best as I can. You know, a lot of people are saying, oh, he's tweeting, but, you know, he's a media guy, so he's just messaging. And he's really trying to keep people a little confused, maybe perhaps intentionally, as part of his personality and tactics. And I don't know if it's because he ran a reality show or, and I don't mean that in a disparaging way. The problem is that now he's president-elect, and what he's messaging out there has an impact on young people's lives. These are children who are confused and concerned and in fear for their parents and their families. So while perhaps President-elect Trump thinks that he's playing a messaging game and he's trying to sort of create a new way of communicating, and perhaps that's a tactic politically that he's using, it's our job to call out that tactic and say, you know what, there are vulnerable people who are affected by that, and these are young children. They're Americans, many of these students, in everything, minus the certificate. Their lives are really affected. They're hanging on every word that's being said. And I just don't sure that he understands that as he's moved into this mode now of president-elect. And it's important for us to try to remind him, to try to reinforce that real people's lives are affected by not just what he does, but by what he says.
If I could add just one point, one of our great hopes at the Southern Poverty Law Center is that Mr. Trump mightily disappoints the white supremacists, the white nationalists who are celebrating his victory now. Some of the early signs are obviously not hopeful. The bizarre and disheartening naming of Mr. Bannon as the chief strategist is a very unfortunate sign. But we are not going to let him forget his pledge, and we are going to keep pushing in the hopes that he does disappoint some of the people who've brought him to the party.
Richard.
Yes.
Speaking of just the point you were making.
I'm sorry.
To the point you were just making, Richard Spencer, he seems to be beginning what he wants to call his danger tour. He's going to Texas A&M next week. He's hoping to speak at the University of Michigan. Following that, I mean, he seems to be so determined right now to take advantage of the Trump effect and to, get on campus, confront the microaggression, safe space, points of view that, if it's a college, every voice needs to be heard. So, he's taking advantage of the public university, Texas A&M. If he can do that at other public universities, I mean, how does your role change, or what is your role in confronting what seems to be more than a nascent white supremacist movement and on some of our campuses?
Well, let me turn to someone who has members on each and every one of those campuses.
So, we have a very activist union, and at Michigan, in Oregon, other places, New York City, A&M, we have some membership in community colleges, not A&M directly. But what's happening is that our membership is creating a circle of protection for our students that are most vulnerable and for our educators that are most vulnerable. And they will be out in force fighting not fighting against free speech, but fighting against the incitement and fighting for the rights and dignity and the inclusion and fighting against the bias. So we're already organizing around University of Michigan, and we're already organizing in several other places. But this is part of what we believe is our role in terms of, as Janet said, really protecting our most vulnerable charges. And that goes for our universities as well as for our pre-K, elementary, and secondary schools. So we are, working with and trying to get the college administrations to ensure that there are protections against incitement, but we're also going to be out there fighting for the pluralism and the inclusiveness that we believe is necessary in America.
Is there a place for it to be taught?
There's so much going on right now. Answer, yes. And what we have actually done with Southern Poverty Law Center and others is we have a platform now called Share My Lesson, which is free for anyone. And we've put a lot of materials on that platform about, course materials, curricular materials, about how to teach inclusiveness, how to teach against bias, how to do all of this, and trying to do it in a way that's apolitical. And so there's lots of that's going around. So yes, we're going to use this as an opportunity to educate as well as an opportunity to protest. But what we're not going to do is we're not going to take a page from them about suppressing the right of free speech.
Yes, sir.
Hi, thanks. Just curious as to how systemic you think this is going to be. And going back to the data of the SPLC, this data you're showing us is 10 days after the election. Now we're 20 days on. Does the data show that in the last 10 days this trend is continuing, or is it declining, or is it getting worse? I think that would point to how systemic this probably is.
Look, in the days after the election, we saw a lot of celebrations, a lot of people acting out. Kind of the gloves are off because, political correctness was out the window. We've seen that die down somewhat. But to think that kind of the hate is gone is, I think, be quite naive. We're going to see spikes again and again, and around the inauguration, for example. We're going to see low-level harassment continuing. Study came out recently that said 35% of Mr. Trump's Twitter followers also followed white supremacist sites or white supremacist Twitter accounts. Among all the white supremacist Twitterers, the most popular site or the most popular Twitter handle was white genocide. The second most popular was Donald Trump. So I think that this is not going to go away. It's going to continue to fester and continue to flourish until Mr. Trump takes decisive action, acknowledges his wrongdoing, apologizes, reaches out, repairs the damage. And of course, this is not going to be something, it's going to fall to religious leaders, school teachers, people in their communities to assist in repairing this damage.
If I could add to that.
Yeah, of course.
Thank you. Again, I'm Brenda Abdullah from Muslim Advocates. We started tracking hate crimes against Muslims and those perceived to be Muslim back in November of 2015. When we started tracking it, at one point, over 50% of the incidents were against houses of worship in particular. And the way we've been tracking them, and we have a map on our website as well, in which you're welcome to look at, is looking towards both federal law as well as state law and what may fall within the definition of a hate crime there. And we have not seen it slow down at all since November 2015. And unfortunately, with the inauguration coming up, we're concerned that there might be another spike around that time as well.
Yes, ma'am. Another ma'am, sorry.
Hi, my name is Karina and I work for Swedish News Channel, and we have daily children's news for children between 10 and 14. You are obviously adults, but you do talk a lot about how children are affected, and I was wondering if you could give me a few specific examples so that children watching this understand what other children specifically are going through.
Our report on after the election day, the Trump effect, really, I hope you have a copy, is filled with very specific examples of, swastikas, fights, graffiti, name calling, bullying that we've seen. I know that the teachers in Randy's union could probably multiply what we've seen tenfold. In the back of our report, we also have some recommendations for teachers for how they can set the tone in their classrooms, how they can do what they can within the confine of their four walls to make the world a better place for their students. Randy, I don't know if you want to add something.
So that's why in my earlier remarks I gave you one of the examples. So if you're in a little boys' room and in a junior high school, and you see written on one of the stalls something that says N, it's frightening. And so what teachers in that school did, because it was not just that, it was also several other places where they saw things written whites only, white America. What they did in that school is that the educators came together, created a plan, created things we call restorative justice circles, had kids talk about their feelings, had kids talk together in a very diversified setting, and try to deal with and create and understand the anxiety and try to create some semblance of security and a safe space. That example is replicated throughout the country. In LA, we have many, many kids and teachers who are what we call DACA-mented, people who have actually gone through the United States DACA program that President Obama has done, and they themselves are scared to death, as Richard said, that the new administration will use this information to not only rescind DACA, but to deport them. Kids have told their teachers that they're really afraid when they're in school that their parents will be taken away. Muslim kids have told their teachers that they don't want to wear anything that shows that they are Muslim. So teachers are hearing this from all over. I've heard those stories in Dearborn. I've heard stories about Dreamers in LA. I gave you a story about Minneapolis. The report that SPLC put together, every one of these incidents, the 10,000 incidents in the report, has a story attached to it.
Thank you. Hi, Penny Starr with CNS News. Do you take a position on the sometimes violent protest against Trump being elected president? Because there's violence in those protests too.
Sure. You know, our report our work also collected instances of anti-Trump violence. I think we documented between 20 and 30. And we would condemn those just as well, and at the same time, defend the free speech rights of the protesters. So we didn't ignore that at all. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, just to follow up, because there's a lot of talk about creating safe spaces for kids that are, and especially the dreamers. But I'm wondering if you're putting a lot of ability on Trump to call out the hate and beyond the "stop it" phrase that he used in that interview. But I'm wondering, when you look at social media, it seems to me, following what people are saying on social media, that they've become silos, that people are really not talking to each other, that they're screaming past each other and repeating whatever the talking points are on the left or the right or whatever. So I'm just wondering, where do you get the optimism that somehow that will lessen because he comes out and says, stop it, or be a little more forceful? What you see on social media is being replicated in workplaces and schools and other public spaces where people are not talking to each other.
Yeah. I think on this one, it's just leadership matters. We're in a time and moment where we need to see that leadership in this particular area. We all have talked about the challenges of social media and the inability to filter what's true and not true. We're going to have a long, I think, period here in this country about how do we reconcile that? How do we deal with that? And, it may well be that in some of these schools, these kids are just being kids. They're pranks, right? But when you're in an environment of heightened anxiety, we all have a responsibility to step in as leaders and to try to create a stable and unified environment. And we're doing our part. We're trying to make sure that as community leaders across the country, we're giving our folks the tools they need. Don't panic, but try to educate our folks about what options they have. And violence is never the answer. In schools, teachers are being trained and given those resources. We're seeing church leaders, faith-based leaders, stepping in to think about how they can step in. Well, we need the president-elect and our future president to also think about what he can do and say. And so it's not just on one person, but that presidency is the most important role that we have in this country, and he needs to do his part. He can't do it alone, but we're all trying to do our part. We need him to do his part.
I see a question in the back.
Hi, my name is Shota Sato. I'm a reporter for Tokyo Broadcasting System, and I am a father of two girls, 6 and 4. I don't mean to personalize this, but my question is, when all these comments and this racist-ish attitude is shown from your president-elect, how are we, adults or parents, supposed to explain or interpret this to the younger ones? How are we supposed to explain what's going on and lead them to the right direction?
I think it's an incredible conundrum. One of the disturbing facts that we uncovered in our earlier Trump Effect report that came out in March was that almost half of the teachers in the country had decided they couldn't talk or they couldn't teach about the election this time because they didn't know what to say about what Mr. Trump was saying. So I think that that is a problem, for teachers. I think it's less of a problem for parents in the faith community. I think all of those folk got to speak out. First thing, of course, is to protect the victims, right? To surround them with love, surround them with caring adults. But I think when the president is saying things that are so discordant with our most cherished values, it's an incredibly hard job.
Let's just take two more and then try to back home.
Sure.
Thanks. I'm Kira Lerner with Think Progress. Janet touched on this a bit, but Trump has clearly been trying to confuse the media and confuse the public about what his policies will look like, who he'll name to his cabinet. He'll tweet a blatant lie and then go back on that lie. He'll float something like the Muslim ban and then change his mind on it 10 times. How is this uncertainty specifically affecting the populations you work with? And what does it look like when people are just uncertain of what's going to happen in the next few months?
Hi, again, I'm Brenda from Muslim Advocates. I'll take a stab at that. So as a candidate, we saw Donald Trump using divisive and really hateful rhetoric that singled out a number of different communities across the board. And I think what's most concerning right now is his appointments. And I think the appointments themselves are a signal that those policies that he tweeted, that he said on the campaign trail, everything from a registry for Muslim immigrants, everything from concerns about a judge's ethnicity and being able to, properly adjudicate cases, as well as mass surveillance of mosques. All of that campaign rhetoric, when you look at the campaign rhetoric and you look at the appointments, they connect. And so our greatest concern there is really that to take a stand right now against the bigotry and campaign rhetoric would call for President-elect Trump to also change course when it comes to his appointments as well.
I think we're going to take one more question from the room and then turn to the phone. Yes, ma'am. Whoops.
Sorry. Thanks. Marie Claudet with the CBC. I just wonder if you could talk a little bit about the face of extremism. Like we see Richard Spencer, like a highly educated guy, very polished. Like, are there a lot more Richard Spencers out there? And could you compare it to the old face of extremism, like the KKK and groups that were more marginalized?
Spencer, the head of the National Policy Institute, is a committed racist. His words make that clear. He believes in an ethno-national state. He believes that men are created unequal and that there should be what he calls peaceful ethnic cleansing. He's a follower of Hitler. There have been other Richard Spencers before. There have been a number of charismatic, highly educated white supremacists. One that comes to mind, the late Dr. William Pierce, the leader of the National Alliance, the author of the book that was the blueprint for the Oklahoma City bombing. Dr. Pierce was a physicist. He was also a follower of George Lincoln Rockwell, the former American Nazi Party. So I think it's naive to think that all people in white supremacist organizations are dim-witted. I think there are a number of highly intellectual, if twisted, people there. So we've seen Richard Spencer's in the past. I think it's very, very important when the media interview him for them to confront him with his statements. Richard Spencer's news because Steve Bannon is news. So I wouldn't say that I'd say it's important to cover him because one might argue that Bannon is his alter ego. The reason I say that is because Richard Spencer is the originator of the alt-right, and Mr. Bannon has said that his Breitbart news site was the platform of the alt-right. Yeah.
Do you have any suggestions for what ordinary Americans can do to promote tolerance and inclusiveness and to fight the hate?
Just one thing. First, one correction. There's no such thing as an ordinary American. There are only those who have answered the call and those who have not. And each and every one of us, in our own way, has a responsibility to push back against anything that is, contrary to our values in a country, whether, with your family, whether at work, whether in your house of worship, whether in a civic organization. people aren't powerless. And, you know, the worst thing that one can believe is that that individuals can't make a difference. That's always a self-fulfilling prophecy when people think that individuals can't make a difference. And our history, the civil rights movement, for example, shows just the opposite. So I don't mean to call you out on that ordinary American thing, but anyway. We have a question on the phone, as I understand it.
We have a question from the line of Kent Falk from the Birmingham News. Please proceed with the question.
Yes, regarding the incidents in the reports, do you see any kind of trend or anything that would indicate this is in a blue state or red state or north, south, east, or west?
Kent, it's good to hear you, if only barely. Kent is from our state. You know, if you look at the map, Kent, you can see at least the distribution of the 867 instances that we documented of hate instances. My colleague, Maureen Costello, the head of our Teaching Tolerance Program and the author of the Trump Effect Report, is here. Maureen, were you saying?
That in terms of the school results. Sorry. In terms of the school results, there were no regional patterns, and we found many problems in both red states and blue states. It really boils down in schools to the demographics of schools. So if you have a large number of immigrant students or Muslim students, there's the fear. It doesn't break down that easily. I want to make a point as we look in particular with the lens of the Latino community. I want to be clear that right now we know that of all children under the age, Latino children under the age of 18, 95% of them are American citizens. I think it's important to note that we're talking about citizen children for the most part. 95% of Latino children are American citizens. So many of them find themselves being taunted or attacked or terrorized, and they're American born. And you know, a lot of times, part of what happens in these environments is that there's broad brushes painting all of these communities together, and it's why this unity matters here today, and all of us coming together saying it's not about one particular group. It's really about standing up for the principles of tolerance and inclusion and equal protection under the law.
I want to thank everyone for coming this morning. You know, together, collectively, where our commitment is to hold Mr. Trump to the first commitment he made when he was clear that he was the president-elect, and that was to bind the wounds of division in our country. It has to be done with more than words. It has to be a pledge that he takes seriously, that he works to repair that with his actions, that he apologizes to the communities that he has injured, and that his policies reflect that commitment. Until he does, it will be a commitment that's unfulfilled. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
That's something I'm trying to get myself. Yes, he is a hard man to get a hold of.
Yeah.
You want to talk to anybody?
No, I think I'm done. There's a lot of material.
Better.
I like this.
Okay. Have a great day.
Just send me your stuff when you.
I'll send you my piece. Yeah.
Have fun. Get some sleep.
Yeah.
You look tired.
Thank you.
As we leave this briefing, you should know that it will be available for viewing later today on our website. Go to cspan.org. And we have more on this issue this morning from thehill.com. Law enforcement endorsements are rushing in for Jeff Sessions, the Alabama senator picked by Donald Trump to be the nation's next attorney general. The list includes two of the major police unions in the country, the Fraternal Order of Police, the biggest police union in the country, and the AFL-CIO's International Union of Police Associations. Read more about that at thehill.com today. And we have more live coverage coming up on the C-SPAN networks today. Here on C-SPAN 3, starting at 6 p.m.